last 7 weeks, we've been having actually 8 weeks, we've had several conversations about 10 paths to God. Last week we spoke about the idea of tzedakah. Today we're going to speak a little bit about chesed. The ideas are not my own. These ideas are based on Rabbi Jonathan Sachs' teachings. And I think we have to ask the question we started with when we started the series, which is, as Jews, why do we do what we do? Why do we use Judaism the way we do? What's the motivation behind it? Is it simply because we believe that Judaism offers a better moral lifestyle? Is it because Judaism is familiar? Is it because we believe that Judaism ultimately will give us happier life, marital life, better children, better society? What is the motivation for our involvement in our Judaism? Because if it's anything I just described, then you're missing the point of what Judaism ultimately truly wants. And what it truly wants is for you to have a relationship with Borei Olam, with God. Now, of course, it's not easy for anyone to build a relationship with an infinite being, and certainly Judaism itself, it wasn't designed for a weak-minded practitioner. It was designed for a very astute intellectual who understands nuance, someone who is willing to put in the effort, the energy to extrapolate the depth and the beauty behind what the Torah itself wants. It's not what you think it is. We often think that Judaism is, well, it's just about how you practice it, and depending on the denomination of Judaism that you fit into, well, that's what your Judaism is, and that's a mistake. Judaism has a very clear vision of what it wants us to accomplish as individuals, as a community, as a society. But I would say at the core of what Judaism ultimately wants is for you to understand what the role of chesed is and how to apply it to your life. And I would say that out of all the conversations you're going to hear about, classes, Torah classes you go to, the one on chesed to me are always the most important. Because it's not like all ideas, if it's not something that you're actually working on, you're not really assimilating it and internalizing it. So for example, everyone here knows that they have to have some type of hakarat hatov for their parents. You have to have some kind of feeling of indebtedness to your family for the things they've given to you. But if you're not working on feeling indebted, you'll never have a deep appreciation for your parents. If you're not working on building that relationship with your parents to connect to them, they'll always just be those older annoying people that gave birth to you that you have to have respect for, but not because of anything beyond that. There's nothing more substantial to that relationship. And this is true for all things. All things require effort, especially for human beings. We're designed in a way where we're selfish, narcissistic. We only think about our own personal wants. We often make decisions for our personal gain. And it's no secret. I've said this to you before. I say that I've married many couples. I've met with hundreds of couples, and every one that gets engaged, everyone that stands under the chuppah is doing it for one reason alone, because they selfishly believe they're going to take from the person that they're marrying. And the truth is that if you truly love someone with the full weight of what the word love means, you would never want to marry that person because you simply wouldn't want to subjugate them to your own insanity. If you truly love somebody, you'd want to find them someone better who doesn't, won't drive them crazy. But the truth is, everyone has their mishigas, their craziness, and your job is to feel bad for them, but to recognize that at the very least you'll be benefiting from being in that relationship. The reason why so many people get relationships wrong, right? The reason why the divorce rate in America is 49.5%, right? It went down, it's true, it went down. It was 52.5% before COVID. And then the reason why it went down is because less people got married in 2019, not because less people got divorced. I would imagine, I know for a fact that the divorce rate is actually higher today than it was before, but they haven't yet released those numbers. I only know that anecdotally from my friends who are lawyers, divorce lawyers, and you can't get an appointment with them, they're busy. Get on the waiting list for a good lawyer. Well, how do so many people get it wrong? Right? How do so many people get something that is so clear, right, wrong? Now, I imagine that anyone who wants to get married doesn't want to do that if they believe there's a strong chance they're going to get divorced. No one gets married if they think there's a 50% chance they're getting divorced. But somehow, 50% of all couples end up getting divorced. So what are they missing? What's lacking? Now the truth is those numbers are actually modest in America. The numbers are much worse, let me tell you. Ready? So first-time marriages, okay, you're young, you're immature, you made a mistake. Okay, second-time marriages fare much better, right? Second-time marriages have a higher chance of success. Spoiler alert, they don't. It's actually lower, right? When you add second-time marriages into the mix, the divorce rate in America is at 72.5%. Now, if you knew that 72.5% of all airplanes crashed, would you fly? No. Good. I always get someone, yes, of course I would. If I was a pilot, I'm like, don't go into investing, you're clearly not a math major. Yeah, absolutely not. You would not fly. So then why do so many people want to get married? Because they believe that they're going to be the exception. Right? You still believe on some level that you're going to be that small part of that 26.5% of people that are going to survive the plane crash. And that's a horrible way of walking into any kind of relationship. And I would say that at the core, what Judaism wants from your relationship is it wants you to use it as a paradigm for connecting to a higher relationship, something much more bigger, something bigger than yourself. And therefore, I would say that the one thing that gets in the way of all relationships is your self, your ego, your identity. Because in a marriage, if you want to use legal terms, the legal word for marriage is a merger of two corporate entities. And I know that no one here actually thinks about a marriage like that, but you do subconsciously. Because every single person in this room is guilty of thinking, well, if I'm in a relationship, then there's certain things that have to be there, like A, B, and C. And if they are not providing A, B, and C, then I will not be providing X, Y, and Z. And if they stop providing it, or if we do agree to A, B, and C, and X, Y, and Z, the second any one of those things stop, the whole thing comes to an end. And that, my friends, is not a marriage, that's a merger of two corporate entities. So then what is a marriage? What's the word for marriage in a Jewish ceremony? Right? The chuppah is called two things, kiddushin and nesuin. Okay, what does the word kiddushin mean? Kedusha. So what does the word kadosh mean? To separate, right? So where's the separation at the wedding? Isn't it two people getting together?
Separating from our old life.
Okay, good. So Jessica is saying very deeply that really what's happening in the chuppah is that the chatan and the kala say to one another that I am going to separate myself from everyone else around the world and only commit myself to you and you alone. And the other says the same exact thing. I'm separating myself from everybody else and I'm becoming to you and you alone. And through this separation, you have the holiness of marriage. But what is the nesu'in of marriage then? I understand the kedusha, that's the easy part, right? Okay, you don't touch him, I don't touch anybody else. Okay, high five, let's go, yalla. Right? But what does the nesu'in part of this relationship look like? So the word nesu'in comes from the word nes, right, which also means to carry. And at its core, the nesu'in is really a ceremony where two people are saying to one another, no matter what happens, no matter how heavy this relationship gets, I'm never going to let you go. I'm going to hold you in my arms forever. No, I'm just joking. But I'm not joking. But it's the idea that most people don't think about when they're actually building a relationship. And what's the most important thing you're looking for when you're finding someone? You're looking for something called not love, not mutual understanding, not partnership, but commitment. So that, Cheryl? Oh, nice. So good. So the word commitment is the most important ingredient that you're looking for. And the commitment muscle is the ikar, the bedrock of what you're looking for in a partner and a spouse. Now, chesed isn't like tzedakah, right? Whereas tzedakah is very simple. It's my obligation, my duty to go ahead and to provide for you. I'm going to give you this dollar. You need it. Here you go. Here's $1. You need a sandwich. Here's a sandwich. You need something else. Here's a tzedakah. I take care of it. How is chesed different than tzedakah? We spoke a little bit about last week. We said, whereas tzedakah represents your obligation, chesed means going outside of all obligations, no obligations, going beyond your chiyuv, beyond your obligation, right? That's what chesed is. So, what does chesed look like for an adult? What does it look like? I'm saying you're old thinking people, right? And we understand that if you're not working on becoming something, you're not working on building, creating, understanding, you're going nowhere, right? To be good does not mean to avoid doing evil. To be good means you're proactively working on being good, to be better. And everyone here will agree that chesed, would you go out with someone who doesn't want to do chesed? No. Right? No one wants to go out with someone who's not chesed oriented. Chesed is important. What does chesed look like for an adult? What does chesed look like for a thinking person? What does chesed look like for a society? How do you build a society based on chesed? Because remember, any midah, any trait to any extreme is bad. What does chesed look like when it's bad? Chesed, when it's bad, is when you overwhelm someone with whatever you have to give. It's too much. Yo, stop. Give me my space. Too much. I need to have the ability of being my own. Parents often do this. They think they're doing chesed to their kids, and they're destroying their children by not giving them space. Right? The earth, even if the sky wants to give it rain because it's dry, if it's too dry, the earth can't receive the chesed. You have to be in the right frame of mind to be able to receive chesed. Chesed requires a little bit of finessing. It's not so simple just to give. You can't solve problems by just giving. You have to create independence. No chesed is a problem also. You don't love. So where's that happy medium? What does it look like? What does it look like for you with your friends, your family? What does it look like for your community? So this quote over here is a quote from Rabbi Sachs's book, to The Home We Built Together. By the way, this book was one of his most quoted books that he wrote. After he died, when all the dignitaries around the world spoke about Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, they quoted this book as the one book that changed their lives. It's this book and To Heal a Fractured World, which is the next one. So this is what he says. He says, covenants and contracts, okay, are different things and address different aspects of our humanity. In a contract, what matters is that both gain. In a covenant, what matters is that both give. Contracts are arrangements entered into for mutual advantage. They are undertaken by individuals or groups on the basis of self-interest. They have a specific purpose. They can be terminated by mutual consent. They end once both parties have fulfilled their obligation. By contrast, covenants are moral commitments. They're open-ended. They are sustained not by letter of the law or by self-interest, but by loyalty, fidelity, faithfulness. In fact, the key word of Judaism, emunah, usually translates as faith, is better translated as faithfulness. Social contracts creates a state. Social contracts creates a society. Social contract is about power and how it is to be handled within a political framework. Social covenant is about how people live together despite their differences. Social contract is about government. Social covenant is about coexistence. Social contract is about laws and their enforcement. Social covenant is about the values we share. Social contract is about the use of potentially coercive force. Social covenant is about moral commitments, the values we share, and the ideals that inspire us to work together for the sake of the common good. As Jews, is the Torah a covenant or is it a contract? It's what?
Covenant.
It's a covenant, right? The Declaration of Independence, is that a covenant or is that a contract? Different, right? Very different. And now what does that look like? How does it play itself out? You can see if you actually reread this carefully, you'll understand the ramifications of the difference between a contract and a covenant. And he continues, he says, what is chesed? It is usually translated as kindness, but it also means love. Not love as emotion or passion, but love is expressed as deed, meaning love as action. Theologians define chesed as covenant of love. Covenant is bound by which two parties pledge themselves to one another, each respecting the freedom and integrity of the other, agreeing to join their separated destinies into a single journey that they will travel together, fearing no evil, for you are with me. Unlike a contract, it is open-ended, relationship live towards an unknown future. And that is what chesed is. But I would say more than that. Chesed is the ability of committing to a person or to a community or to an ideal that requires you to go beyond your self-interests. It's very annoying. I don't want to help that old lady across the street right now. I have to get to a meeting. You know, I don't want to stand up. I'm tired, or I'm sitting. I got a nice spot on the train. Why should I get up and just give it to somebody else? I don't need to do those things. But sometimes chesed requires that you start thinking about others more than you think about yourself. I would argue that in my opening statement that the reason why so many people get divorced today is because they're stuck in the first stage of marriage, which is, I'm only getting married because of what I'm benefiting from this relationship. In order for a marriage to evolve into something more, you have to use this element of chesed, which is really the ability of seeing your partner's identity as an extension of your own. How many people here do chesed for other communities? How many people here volunteer for the church not too far from here? Or the mosque not too far from here? I'd imagine nobody does, right? Oh, you do?
Food bank.
What's that?
Food bank.
Food bank? Okay. And why do you do that?
I think it's important for religious Jews to get out into the world, so that non-Jews.
So it's more of a PR thing.
Yeah.
I want there to be good PR. I don't want Jews to be thought of as only takers. I want Jews to be thought of as givers. Okay, that's fine, that's beautiful, but that's not chesed. It's definitely a chesed, right? But that's not what chesed is, right? Because what chesed requires, it requires for you to deeply identify with this other person. You know, Bezrat Hashem, I'm going to celebrate my 25th anniversary this September. It's a big one. Terrifying. Screwed up, I always do. But I would say that 25 years of commitment to one person is easy. The commitment part is easy. The hardest part is the working through the emotional and intellectual nuances of a relationship where you are able to hear your spouse's wants, their voice, their needs as an extension of your own. That's the hardest part of being married. Of recognizing that your wife's identity or your spouse's identity is an extension of your own identity. The thing that gets in the way of all marriages is the self. So if you can't be committed to the process of growing out of your narcissism, your selfishness, then you can never be in a successful relationship. And if we as people, as a community, can't be or aren't willing to grow outside of our own identity as individuals for ourselves, our immediate family, right? At the very, very, I'm saying then how could we go ahead and go back and give to the broader community around us in a way that's meaningful? And the answer is you can't. And I would say that what Judaism wants, it wants you to be close to Hashem. Torah wants you to have a relationship with Borei Olam. And the way in which we get closer to Hashem is by following His mitzvot, by following the commandments. Right? That's how I build a relationship. How do I date someone? Why do I date them? I date them so I can know what they want, what they like, what they don't like. And I aggressively work on not doing the things that they don't like. And I proactively work on doing all the things that they do like, if I like them. That's what I do. If I don't, then I'll just make sure that I do what they don't like and I end the relationship and we move on. Right? But it's very simple. I'm oversimplifying it. But you're adults now, and therefore you need to be thinking about your Judaism with adult language. So this is what Rabbi Sachs writes in this book called A Letter and a Scroll. He says, the logic of covenant, unlike the social contract of the state, has nothing to do with rights, power, and self-interest. Instead, it's defined by three key words: mishpat, tzedek, and chesed. What are these three things? Mishpat means roughly justice as reciprocity. It's a principle of the covenant, which with Noah, as you do, so shall you be done to you. It is a legal equivalent of Hillel's famous saying, that which is hateful to you, don't do it to your neighbor. Mishpat is the universal minimum of a just society. Wrong is punished, injury redressed. All persons are equal under the law, and all have access to it. Tzedek, or tzedakah, is far more radical idea. The word tzedakah is usually translated as charity, but in fact it means social or distributive justice, as we spoke about last week. In biblical law, it involved a whole series of institutions that together constituted the first ever attempt at welfare state. Tzedek, the Bible's welfare legislation, is built on the premise that freedom has an economic dimension. Not only does powerlessness enslave, so too does poverty. So no one is to forfeit his independence or dignity. And finally there's chesed, usually translated as kindness, but in fact meaning covenantal love. Chesed is the loyalty I owe to those who are members of my family. Let's read that again. Chesed is the loyalty I owe to those who are members of my family. And a covenantal society is one in which all citizens form a single extended family as the children of one God. Much of the Bible's welfare legislation, especially those provisions which concern rescuing someone from servitude, is introduced by such phrases as, if your brother becomes poor. God himself used the language of family in announcing the redemption of the Israelites in Egypt. My son, my firstborn, Israel. This is the origin of the concept of fraternity invoked by French Revolution. As a secular concept, though, it has never succeeded because the necessary theological foundation, the brotherhood, the man under the parent of God, is lacking. Chesed represents the idea that a gracious social order can never be constructed on the basis of rights and obligations alone. There are times when we must go beyond the letter of the law, beyond the requirements of equity and reciprocity. Chesed is the personal, unquantifiable I-thou dimension of society. The compassion, the humanity that can never be formalized as laws, but instead belong to the quality of relationships. So the idea that the poor, the widow, the orphan, the stranger are my brothers and sisters, and that's the way I really feel about everyone here. I think of all of you as family. I do that. And if you know me well enough, you know I'm not just saying that. It's true. Like, I'll do anything for you guys. But that comes from a lot of work on not seeing people and their vices as things that separate me from them, but rather I see people and their differences as a way of understanding different aspects of myself and the world around me. I'm not afraid of different kinds of people. I'm not afraid of people that think differently than me. I'm not afraid of new ideas. I'm not afraid of the other. I welcome them because I recognize at the very least if I am going to try to create a world that is happy, healthy, meaningful, that is beautiful, it can't happen unless I'm willing to open myself up to the possibility of the other. That, my friends, is the beginning of chesed, real chesed, not just volunteering, not just giving of your time, but it's truly the idea of recognizing that you have a social responsibility to the people around you and to the people in this room. How many people in this room, I'm assuming everyone here is dating, how many people in this room feel a social obligation to help everyone in this room find their bashert? Right? That's awesome. Awesome. Right? Now what are you doing about it? Right? So you feel it, but chesed isn't just love, it's love to action. It requires movement on your part. Well, what are we doing about it? And I'm not saying you have to have the answer. And I'm not saying you have to go out and start like an organization tomorrow. All I'm saying is that you have to be asking the question, how am I going to evolve myself from this place of just thinking of an idea, believing that this idea resonates deeply with me, that I live it, into I want to make this my reality. Because Judaism isn't just about ideas, it's practical living. Right? I want to build society, I want to create an environment. And this is what he says. Look at number 4. He says, tzedek and mishpat belong to morality. Chesed and rachamim belong to ethics. The former are about justice, the latter about loving intention. For which the simplest English term is care. Justice is and must be impersonal. You shall not recognize persons in judgment, says the Devarim. The beauty of justice is that it belongs to the world of order, and constructed out of universal rules through which each of us stands equally before the law. Chesed, by contrast, is intrinsically personal. I cannot care for the sick. bring comfort to the distressed, or welcome a visitor impersonally. If we do so, it merely shows that we have not understood what these activities are. Justice demands disengagement. Chesed is in fact engagement, is an act of engagement. Justice is best administered without emotion. Chesed exists only in the virtue of emotion, empathy and sympathy, feeling with and feeling for. We act with kindness because we know that it feels what it feels like to be in need of kindness. We comfort the mourners because we know what it is to mourn. Chesed requires not to detach rationally, but to attach emotionally, intelligently. That's what real chesed is. Chesed requires for you to work cerebrally to align your emotion to your values. How do I take the knowledge of my chesed-oriented soul, chesed-oriented values, and actually live them? Not just say them on a piece of paper, these are my core values, but actually live them. That's what we want. Because remember, the conversations we've had up until now are all about the same thing. It's about 10 paths to God. This is a path. Chesed is just like tzedakah is a path to getting to God, chesed is a path to getting to God. Why is that important to me? It's important to me because I don't believe these principles, like Rabbi Sachs said earlier, actually have any longevity if there's no God. I don't need to do chesed. If there's no God, then I just believe in a very Darwinian world where might makes right, and power and decision making goes to the mighty, and the weak suffer. That's just too bad. They're at the bottom of the gene pool, and therefore that's their lot. They got unlucky. That's what the caste system actually tried to replicate. But as Jews, we reject this. We say that all Jews can be part of something called the Mamlechet Kohanim, a nation of priests. You're meant to be an Or the Goyim, not just the priestly class, but all of you. And that's part of what you're doing. You're being an Or the Goyim, right? You want to be that light onto the Jewish nations. But in order for us to get there, again, as a people, we need to evolve. And the hardest thing to evolve out of is our own selfish thinking. Only me. Every decision is me. Every choice I'm making is only about me. And that kind of thinking is super destructive, it's unhealthy, it leads to depression, and I believe it is the ultimate blockage to any kind of real growth and development. Marriage requires that you have the ability of letting go of the self. I often get, Rabbi, isn't compromise an important part of marriage? And I'll say this, and it's going to sound crazy, but before you judge me, just give me a minute to explain it. Okay, I say that you should never compromise in a marriage. Right? You should never have to compromise in a marriage. Why? So let's talk about what compromise looks like. I want to go to the basketball game, and she wants to go to the ballet. I said, okay, we'll compromise. I'll go with you on Sunday to the ballet, you go with me to the basketball game on Monday. Good? Yeah, awesome. So I go with her to the ballet on Sunday, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, this is the stupidest thing in the world. A bunch of women on their tutus, sitting on their tippy toes, flying around, spinning around, and like, I don't get it. It's like dumb, right? Chaval hazman, chaval hakesef, right? And the next day, she comes with me to the basketball game, and I'm so excited. Like, now you'll see like what real pastime. This is basketball, right? And she's sitting there. This is the stupidest thing in the world. A bunch of grown men running around, schwitzing, throwing a ball into a little hole, jumping up and down like monkeys. Like, this is so uncivilized. So how did my compromise solve anything? The answer is it didn't, right? It just allowed two people to be annoyed with the other person and recognize that they're both brutish in their own unique way, right? So what is the real way of dealing with two people who want different kinds of things, okay? So, and this is not easy, by the way. Instead of hearing your spouse say, let's compromise, come into the game, I'll go do the game, you can go to the ballet, you have to reframe what's being said into, a part of me likes ballet. I need to understand why. A part of me likes basketball. I need to understand why. That's not compromise. That's a fact-finding mission, right? It's very, very different, right? In compromise, no one's happy because someone's always giving you something. But in a happy, healthy relationship, if you're actually trying to live the goal of marriage, by the way, the goal of marriage is not to have children. The goal of marriage is not even to be in love. The goal of marriage is for two people to recognize that they are one. I'm not there yet. It's 25 years. I'm figuring it out still, right? But I think I'm getting a little closer, right? The goal of marriage is to recognize the goal of marriage, what you're working towards in that relationship, is understanding that this other person with their own wants, needs, desires, that all those things that are separate and different than yours are actually a part of yours as well. And that's not easy. Because I don't want to lose myself into someone else. I don't want to let go of who I am for something else. But that relinquishing of, the letting go of, is where the best parts of you exist. And I'm going to say this, but don't misunderstand it. If it's not clear, come to me afterwards. I'll explain it even more for you. It's actually when you're able to relinquish your identity in a healthy, functioning marriage. That's when the couple is actually able to find the highest expression of their truest identity. The thing that's holding every marriage back is their identity. Because most marriages are two people, like I say, two authors who wrote books about their marriage, but they're two separate books. Two people who are conveniently living together with a lot of things in common, but they're never willing to kind of let go of themselves to allow the marriage to evolve into something more. It's not like a Team 6 unit that each member of that team has to let go of what he or she wants so that the mission could actually be accomplished. There is no you in a team. There's only the unit of the team. That's what you're aiming for in a relationship, and that's ultimately what Chesed wants. Chesed, imagine what society looks like when, as a people, as a group of people, we are motivated, not just self-interest. I'm here because I want to be inspired by a class. I'm here because I want to put on my resume that I go to a class. I'm here today because I want to meet someone. I'm here today because, and every decision is based on how it's serving me, which, by the way, is healthy. You should not be in a relationship where you're thinking about the other person until you know that ring is on the finger and the commitment is there. But if you want to work on an expansive view of yourself and the world around you, then ask yourselves, well, how am I putting myself into an environment where I'm growing into seeing the wants and needs of the people around me? If it can't be the friends around you, what about the family around you? What about parents, siblings, cousins, neighbors, and so on and so forth? Friends, however far you want to go. But that's what he's asking us for. Chesed is the evolution of the individual's identity to incorporate the people, the identity of those around them. So look at what Rabbi Slavik. These are 5 different stories that I think encapsulate these ideas. Ready? Number 1. This is Rabbi Slavik. Once 2 Jews died in Brisk on the same day. In the morning, a poor shoemaker who had lived out his life in obscurity died, while about noontime, a wealthy, prominent member of the community passed away. According to the halacha, in such a case, the one who dies first must be buried first. However, the members of the burial society who had received a handsome sum for their heirs of the rich man decided to attend to him first, despite the fact that he had died later. For who was there to plead the cause of the poor man? When Rabbi Chaim of Brisk was informed about this incident, he sent a message to the court to warn the members of the burial society to desist from their disgraceful behavior. The member of the burial society, however, refused to heed the directives of Rabbi Chaim and began to make an arrangement for the burial of the rich man. Rabbi Chaim then arose, took a walking stick, trudged over to the house of the deceased, and chased all the attendants outside. Rabbi Chaim prevailed. The poor man was buried before the rich man. Why was the rabbi so disturbed? Did it really make a difference? They're both dead. Does it really matter who came first? Why was he so bothered by it? There's a story told by about Rabbi Aryeh Levine. Rabbi Aryeh Levine was a famous rabbi in Israel. He was famous because he would often would visit Jews in jails in Israel, and he would comfort them and so on and so forth. And he was known for his shalom bayit and his deep relationship and love for his wife. And you've heard the story. He came home one day and his wife said, my foot hurts. And he says, okay, I'll call the doctor. They call the doctor, make the appointment. The next day he takes her to the doctor. They walk into the doctor's office, and the doctor says, what's wrong? And the rabbi said, our foot hurts. Right? Now, was that like a nice line this old man was using to kind of score with his wife? Or is that an expression of two people who spent 45 years together working on the goal of marriage, recognizing that they are an extension of the other? If you really see this other person as a part of you, how could you not feel their pain? How could you not be motivated to go out and help them? How could you stand by idly? You see the difference? What does our society look like when we start thinking about people that way? The rabbi got up because it's injustice. And if you truly love people, you won't want the poor person who has no one to speak for him to go through a situation which clearly the halakha says is asur. What's the halakha therefore? The halakha is a halicha. It's a pathway for society. It's a way of ensuring that we create the most just society that human beings can actually create. Now, let's look at the second story. Every Friday morning before dawn, the Rebbe of Nemirov would disappear. He could be found in none of the town synagogues or houses of study. The doors of his house were open, but he was not there. Once a Lithuanian scholar came to the Nemirov. Puzzled by the Rebbe's disappearance, he asked the followers, "Where is he? Where's the Rebbe?" They replied, "Where else but in heaven? The people of the town need peace, sustenance, health. The Rebbe is a holy man, and therefore is surely in heaven pleading our cause." Okay, the Lithuanian, amused by the credulity, determined to find out for himself. On Thursday night, he hid himself in the Rebbe's house. The next morning, before dawn, he heard the Rebbe weeping inside. Then he saw him go to the cupboard, take out parcels of cloth, and began to put them on. They were the cloths not of holy men, but of peasants. The Rebbe then reached into the drawer, pulled out an axe, and went out into the still dark night, stealthily. The Lithuanian followed him and walked through the town and beyond to the forest. There he began chopping down trees, hewing logs and splitting them into firewood. These he gathered into a bundle and walked back into the town. In one of the back streets, he stopped outside the rundown cottage and knocked on the door. The old woman, poor and ill, opened the door. "Who are you?" she said. "I am Vasily," the Rebbe replied. "I have wood to sell. Very cheap, next to nothing." "I have no money," replied the woman. "I will give it to you on credit," he said. "How will I be able to pay you?" she said. "I trust you, and do you not trust God? He will find a way in seeing that I repay. But who will light the fire? I am too ill. I will light the fire." The Rebbe replied, and he did so, reciting under the breath of the morning prayers. Then he returned home. The Lithuanian scholar, seeing this, stayed in the town and became one of the Rebbe's disciples. After that day, when he heard the people of the town telling visitors that Rebbe ascended to heaven, he no longer laughed, but added, "and maybe even higher." There's reminds me of a story of Chavetz Chaim, who Chavetz Chaim, believe it or not, had a bodega. He had a fruit store. He would sell groceries, and he was super particular about the groceries that he would sell in the store. He only picked the best fruits, highest quality. He would touch each one, pick them. Imagine getting an apple from the Chavetz Chaim, highest quality apple you can possibly get. Okay. So people recognized that he was always, the same price as everybody else. He had he had the same prices. His quality was superior. So slowly, he was killing all the competition. People stopped shopping at the other stores. There were lines out the door. So he felt bad for his competitors. What did he do? He cut his hours, right? And it made it worse. People would wait. They would stand outside, like by an apple store, waiting to get into, the fruit store to get their fruits. And he would cut it down to 2 hours a week. And when he saw there were still people waiting for the 2 hours a week to sell out in 2 hours, he closed his store down. Now, I'm not saying that's the level that you and I could live on. I'm just sharing it as far as a level of sensitivity. Here's someone who lived in a world where he believed that every dollar that he had was a gift from God. If you do the best, you put your best you into the world, that energy comes back to repay you. He had no safek, no doubt about how he would make his parnasah. Okay? He he was able to let go. This story, how beautiful is a rabbi at night going to chop wood for an old lady who needs firewood? That, my friends, is chesed. The emotional alignment of someone else's needs and then going out and doing something about it. Look at number 7. Story number 3. In 1966, an 11-year-old black boy moved with his parents' family to a white neighborhood in Washington. Sitting with his 2 brothers and 2 sisters on the front step of the house, he waited to see how they would be greeted. They were not. Passers-by turned to look at them, but no one gave him a smile or even a glance of recognition. All the fearful stories he had heard about how whites treated blacks seemed to be coming true. Years later, writing about those first days in their new home, he says, "I knew we were not welcome here. I knew we would not be liked here. I knew we would have no friends here. I knew we should not have moved here." As he was thinking about those thoughts, a white woman coming home from work passed by on the other side of this road. She turned to the children and with a broad smile said, "Welcome," disappearing into the house. She emerged minutes later with a tray laden with drinks, cream cheese, and jelly sandwiches, which she brought over to the children, making them feel at home. That moment, the young man later wrote, changed his life. It gave him a sense of belonging where there was none before. It made him realize at a time when race relations in the United States were still fraught, that a black family could feel at home in a white area, and that there could be relationships with colorblind. Over the years, he learned to admire much about the women across the street, but it was that first spontaneous act of greeting that became for him a definitive memory. It broke down the wall of separation and turned strangers into friends. The young man, Stephen Carter, is now a law professor at Yale, and he eventually wrote a book about what he learned that day. He called it Civility. The name of the woman, he tells us, was Sarah Katzenbaum. And she died all too young, he adds. It was no coincidence that she was a religious Jew. In the Jewish tradition, he notes, such civility is called chesed, the doing of acts of kindness, which is in turn derived from the understanding that human beings are made in the image of God. He adds, civility itself may be seen as a part of chesed. It does indeed require kindness toward the fellow citizens, including the ones who are strangers, and even when it is hard. So, that is at the core. We as Jews have always understood what it means to be the other. We always know what it's like to be, the second-class citizen. We always recognize as Jews that we were, we were mocked and made fun of. But yet somehow, the old Jews of this country recognized that the way in which you heal a world that is all too broken is by being the best you that you can possibly be. And again, the best you is the you that is able to feel the emotional state of the other. Let's look at the next story. Because I don't think these ideas can be articulated into words, but sometimes through the story themselves, hopefully they lead to action. This is what he says over here. This is from To Heal a Fractured World. In the late summer of 1999, I was in Pristina making a television program about the aftermath of the Kosovo campaign. Outside every church was a NATO tank. At the start of the conflict, it had been the Serbian Christians who had attacked mosques. Now they feared reprisal from the returning refugees. The mood was tense. Murders were taking place every night. Revenge was in the air. The most important task was to establish order and to return a civil peace. I interviewed General Sir Michael Jackson, then head of the NATO forces, who, to my surprise, he thanked me for what my people had done. The Jewish community had taken charge of the city's 23 primary schools. He said, the most valuable contribution to the city's welfare. When 800,000 people have become refugees and then return home, the most reassuring sign of life has returned to normal is that the schools open on time. That, he said, we owe to the Jewish people, meaning the head of the Jewish community. Later that day, I asked him how many Jews were currently in Pristina. He answered 11. The story I later uncovered it was fascinating. And clearly, in the early days of the conflict, the state of Israel had, along with many international aid agencies, sent a field medical team to work with the Kosovan Albanian refugees. Immediately, they noticed something others had missed. The aid agencies were contracting, not unnaturally, on the adults. There was no one working with the children. Traumatized by the conflict and far from home, they were running wild. The team phoned back to Israel and asked for young volunteers. Virtually every youth group in Israel, from the most secular to the most religious, sent out teams of youth leaders at 2-week intervals. They worked with the children, organized summer camps, sports, competitions, drama, music events, and everything else they could think of to make their temporary exile feel like a summer holiday. At all levels, it was an extraordinary effort. The Kosovan Albanians were Muslims, and for many Israeli youth workers, it was their first contact and friendship with children of another faith. Their effort won high praise from the UNICEF, United Nations Children Organizations. It was in the wake of this that the Jewish people of Israel, the American-based Joint, and other Jewish agencies were asked to supervise and return normality to the school system in Pristina. That episode taught me many things. The force of chesed, acts of kindness, the beauty, the healing power of kindness extended across the borders of faith, and the way young people can rise into great moral achievements if we set them a challenge. The entire relief effort in Kosovo was wonderful convergence of many people and agencies from many faithful nations, and this is the things that we can do as a people. If we have clarity, a vision, a purpose, understanding of what real chesed is, we could literally change the world together. Let's just end with this last story, and then we'll call it a night. He says, in April 2002, another suicide bomb had exploded in Israel. And I had been interviewed for my reactions by the BBC. A few days later, I received a letter from a lady in Kent. And this is what she wrote. Having listened to you on the radio today and hearing your concern for your people, I felt prompted to write you a letter of comfort. You see, I am a Gentile. I was born in 1943, and years later I met a Jewish woman who made a great difference in my life. I was then in my mid-20s, a victim of a broken marriage and with a small son to care for. I was seeking employment in South London as a hairdresser to pay for our rooms and a child minder. The unemployment agency sent me to a salon. A large motherly woman who greeted me at the interview. Her first words were, "Are you in trouble, my dear?" I was given employment in her salon. Then she offered to house us in the rooms above the shop, furnishing them with carpets, furniture from her own home. She thought then that she employed 2 girls from Leeds to share that flat and to reduce my rent. She also found a very kind childminder of my son. Proverb 31 lady, the famous chapter at the beginning of A Woman of Worth, Eshet Chaya, Huimsa, also spoke a wisdom into my life. I shall always remember her kindness. On the television news, we all saw the dreadful pictures of the bus destroyed in Jerusalem on the eve of the Sabbath. At that sight of the plated loaf lying in the dust, I felt as if a knife had gone through me as the tears ran down my face. For the loaf represented my family, unity, common humanity. We all share in which we are oh so fragile. Please, Rabbi Sachs, accept an outstretched hand to you. Peace within your border, comfort within your people, security within your walls. These are my prayers. It's the small things that we do over long periods of time that have the greatest impact on the world around us. You, my friends, are made up of small little molecules, small little cells. The greatest, tallest mountains are made of small little grains of sand. The largest things in our solar system, our sun, is made of tiny little things called hydrogen. All big things start with small things. You want to connect to God, you want to find your bashert, you want to, most importantly, evolve into becoming a better version of yourself. Pick one small act of chesed that allows you to empathize with the needs of somebody else, allow that to lead to some type of action, and I promise you, you'll be making the world a better place. Thank you so much for coming. Ms. Rash, we'll continue the conversation next week. Have a great night. Questions, comments, concerns? No questions, no comments. Yeah.